The financial advice industry has a starting problem. Every book, every video, every podcast about building wealth assumes you are already somewhere, already saving, already investing, already operating with a margin between what comes in and what goes out that is wide enough to work with. The advice is real and the math is sound, but it is written for someone who has already cleared a hurdle that nobody clearly described a hurdle that stops more people from ever building anything than market crashes, low incomes, or poor investment choices combined. Two people, same city, same age, same job, paying $44,000 a year. Both of them have watched videos about index funds. Both of them understand intellectually that compound interest builds wealth over time. Both of them intend to start investing seriously. One of them, 3 years later, has $11,000 saved and a growing investment account making its first real moves. The other, 3 years later, has roughly the same checking account balance he had 3 years ago, not because he spent irresponsibly, not because something went catastrophically wrong, but because he never cleared the specific threshold that separates people who build wealth from people who intend to build wealth indefinitely without ever beginning. That threshold is $10,000, and the step required to cross it is the one nobody in the financial education space talks about with enough honesty or enough specificity to actually help the person who needs it most. My name is Anderson, and today I want to walk you through exactly what that step is, why it is harder than any subsequent financial milestone you will ever reach, and the specific mechanics that make the difference between the person who clears it and the person who circles it for years without crossing it. Let me start by telling you something that the optimistic framing of most financial content never quite says directly. $0 to $10,000 is the hardest financial journey you will ever make. Not 0 to 100,000, not 100,000 to a million, 0 to 10,000. And the reason it is the hardest is not mathematical. The math at this stage is actually the simplest it will ever be. The reason it is the hardest is structural and psychological, and until you understand those two dimensions clearly, you will continue applying mathematical solutions to problems that are not mathematical in nature. The structural problem is this. Below $10,000 in savings, your financial life has no buffer. None. Every unexpected expense, a car repair, a medical bill, a required work expense, a month where something simply costs more than it normally does, lands directly on your checking account with no absorption layer between the expense and your ability to continue building. This means that the same savings discipline that is moving you toward $10,000 is interrupted repeatedly by the ordinary friction of a life that does not pause for your financial goals. You save $300, something costs $400, you are back below where you started, and the psychological weight of that reversal is heavier than the mathematical setback it represents. This is not a budgeting failure. It is a structural condition, the specific financial fragility that exists below the $10,000 threshold, where life's ordinary turbulence is larger than the buffer available to absorb it. Every person who has tried to save their first significant amount and found themselves repeatedly reset knows exactly what this feels like. The account moves forward, something happens, the account moves back. The cycle repeats until either the person finds a way to break it or gradually stops trying with full conviction. Here is the psychological dimension, and this is the part that most financial content skips entirely because it is uncomfortable to name directly. Below $10,000, saving feels like deprivation without visible reward. You are reducing present consumption, real, tangible things you could have and experience right now in exchange for a number on a screen that is not yet large enough to feel meaningful, not yet generating returns large enough to notice, not yet providing the psychological experience of financial security that would make the sacrifice feel worthwhile. This creates a motivation structure that is almost impossible to sustain through pure willpower alone. The sacrifice is immediate and concrete. The reward is distant and abstract. And the human brain, which is wired to respond to immediate feedback, consistently underweights abstract future benefits relative to concrete present costs. This is not a weakness, it is neuroscience. And designing a savings strategy that requires you to override this wiring through daily acts of willpower is designing a strategy that will fail for most people most of the time, not because they lack discipline, but because they are fighting a biological tendency with a tool-conscious restraint that was never designed for sustained use against persistent temptation. The person who successfully crosses $10,000 does not win through superior willpower. They win by building a system that removes as many willpower-dependent decisions as possible from the process, and the specific system that works at this stage is different from the systems that work later because the constraints are different and the psychological enemies are different. Let me show you the mechanics of what actually works with enough specificity that you can implement it before this week ends. The first element is a contribution amount that is uncomfortably specific. Not a round number, not a vague intention to save as much as possible, but a precise weekly or biweekly transfer that is automated and non-negotiable. The specificity matters because vague intentions produce vague behavior, and vague behavior at this stage produces the cycle of forward and backward motion that keeps people below $10,000 indefinitely. Here is a concrete illustration. Someone earning $44,000 annually takes home approximately $3,100 monthly after standard deductions. If they automate a transfer of $260 every 2 weeks timed to coincide with payday, moving before the money has any opportunity to find other purposes, they are saving approximately $560 monthly. At that rate, with a high-yield savings account earning 4.5%, they reach $10,000 in approximately 17 months, not years. 17 months. Math is not the obstacle. Automation is the entire solution to the structural problem, but the amount matters as much as the automation. $260 every 2 weeks is specific enough to be real and challenging enough to require genuine commitment, but it is not so aggressive that it creates the month-to-month financial pressure that causes most people to abandon or repeatedly pause their savings plan. The number should hurt slightly enough to be meaningful, but not so much that it requires renegotiation every month when life gets expensive. If this is giving you a framework you have been missing, take 2 seconds and hit the like button. It genuinely helps this reach people who are at the very beginning of this journey. The second element that separates people who cross $10,000 from people who approach it repeatedly without crossing it is the treatment of windfalls. A windfall is any money that arrives outside of your regular income, a tax refund, a bonus, a gift, a side income payment, a refund from an overpaid bill, a reimbursement that takes longer to arrive than expected, and then appears when you have forgotten about it. For most people below $10,000 in savings, windfalls are absorbed into consumption within days of arrival, not through irresponsibility, but through the financial pressure that exists below the buffer threshold. The windfall covers what the regular income could not quite cover, or it funds a purchase that has been postponed, or it simply disappears into the checking account and is indistinguishable from regular income within a week. The person who crosses $10,000 has a windfall rule that is established in advance and held without exception. Every windfall above $200, the full amount, not a portion, transfers to the savings account within 24 hours of arrival, before it has generated ideas about what it could become, before the financial pressure of the moment has had time to identify a use for it, before the warmth of unexpected money has been converted into a spending decision that feels justified in the moment and invisible in the rear view. This rule alone, combined with the automated biweekly contribution, can cut the 17-month timeline to $10,000 by 3 to 5 months for most people, because windfalls are more common than people realize when they are paying attention, and their cumulative value over a year is typically between $800 and $2,000 for a median income earner. And if you're finding genuine value in this, consider subscribing. Every week, I make videos like this, specific, honest, built for the person who is actually trying to build something from where they are right now. The third element is the account structure, and this is where the practical details matter more than most financial content acknowledges. The $10,000 cannot live in your checking account. It cannot live in a savings account at the same institution as your checking account, where it is visible on the same screen, transferable in seconds, and psychologically available, even when it is technically designated for a specific purpose. The physical and institutional separation of this money from your daily financial life is not a convenience, it is a structural requirement of the strategy. Open a high-yield savings account at a separate institution. Transfer funds to it on a schedule that has a 1 to 3 business day processing delay. This delay is not an inconvenience. It is a decision buffer, a gap between the impulse to access the money and the actual availability of the money, wide enough that the impulse usually passes before the transfer completes. Most financial emergencies that feel urgent enough to raid a savings account are not emergencies at all. They are expenses that feel urgent because the money appears accessible. The processing delay reveals them for what they actually are: uncomfortable but manageable situations that can be addressed through income and budget adjustment rather than savings withdrawal. The current environment for high-yield savings accounts makes this structurally advantageous in a way it was not a few years ago. Rates between 4 and 5% on savings balances mean that your $10,000 target is earning between $400 and $500 annually, while you build it a meaningful contribution to the timeline that requires no additional effort or decision-making on your part. Now, let me address the moment that derails more people at this stage than any other, the moment the account reaches somewhere between $4,000 and $7,000 and stops feeling urgent. This is the most dangerous phase of the 0 to 10,000 journey. The balance is high enough to feel meaningful, high enough that the psychological scarcity of having nothing has been replaced by the psychological comfort of having something. The urgency that drove the first few months of aggressive saving has dissipated. The contribution continues, but with less conviction. And then something happens: a vacation opportunity, a home purchase conversation, a period of higher expenses, and the question arises of whether the savings target is the right priority right now, or whether the money already accumulated is enough to pause and enjoy. This is the moment the rule must hold most firmly, because the math at this stage is unforgiving in a specific way. $4,000 in savings with consistent automated contributions is 3 months from $6,000. $6,000 is 4 months from $10,000. The entire journey from $4,000 to $10,000, the crossing of the threshold that changes the structural reality of your financial life permanently, is 7 to 9 months away. And the person who pauses at $4,000, depletes to $2,000, and begins again adds not 7 months to their timeline, but 14 to 18 months, because the reset carries a psychological cost that slows the rebuild. The rule that holds here is not about the money. It is about understanding what $10,000 actually does when it exists intact, the buffer it provides, the decision quality it enables, the financial fragility it permanently eliminates, and treating that function as worth more than any single use the money could serve before the threshold is crossed. Here is what to do today. Not this week, today. Open a high-yield savings account at a separate institution if you do not already have one. This takes 20 minutes. The account does not need to be perfect. It needs to exist, with a rate above 4%, at an institution that is not your primary bank. Calculate $260 biweekly, or the equivalent amount that represents between 15 and 20% of your take-home pay, and set up an automated transfer for your next payday. The transfer should be scheduled before you have any opportunity to decide whether this month is a good month for it. Every month will present a reason it is not an ideal month. The automation removes the monthly decision from the domain of willpower. Write your windfall rule on your phone right now. Windfalls above $200 transfer within 24 hours. The rule must exist before the next windfall arrives, because the next windfall will arrive in conditions where the rule is hardest to establish and easiest to violate. Finally, calculate your specific date. At your contribution rate, factoring in realistic windfalls and high yield interest, when do you reach $10,000? Give it a month and a year. A target without a date is a wish. A target with a date is a plan. And the plan is the only thing that makes the 17 months feel finite rather than indefinite. Let me bring you back to where we started. Two people. Same city, same salary, same intellectual understanding of how wealth is built. 3 years later, one of them has crossed $10,000, experienced what that buffer does to the quality of his financial decisions, and is now investing with a consistency that was simply not possible before the threshold existed. The other is still intending to start, still watching the videos, still understanding the math, still postponing the specific structural changes that would make the intention real. The difference between them is not income. It is not discipline in the heroic sense. It is not financial knowledge or investment sophistication or any of the things that financial content typically credits for the gap. It is a biweekly automated transfer, a windfall rule written on a phone, and a savings account at a different institution with a processing delay that makes impulsive withdrawal inconvenient enough to reconsider. That is the step nobody talks about. Not because it is complicated, but because it is unglamorous. There is no viral title in open a separate savings account and automate $260 biweekly. There is no satisfying mathematics to display when the investment returns are measured in hundreds of dollars rather than thousands. There is no identity transformation to narrate when you are still months away from the threshold. But on the other side of that threshold in the morning, you check the balance and it reads $10,000 for the first time. Something really changes, not just in the account, in you, in the way you make financial decisions, in the way emergencies feel, in the way the future looks when it is no longer obscured by the low-grade financial anxiety of having no buffer between your life and the next unexpected expense. That morning is 17 months away for most people watching this. Some of you are closer, some of you need a few more months than that, but it is not years away. It is not a distant aspiration requiring circumstances that have not yet arrived. It is a specific account, a specific automated transfer, a specific rule about windfalls, and a specific date written on a phone. The step nobody talks about is also the step that changes everything that comes after it. And it is available to you right now, today, in the next 20 minutes, if you decide that the future version of yourself who has already crossed the threshold is worth building toward. That version of you is waiting on the other side of a number. The only question is how many paydays it takes you to reach them. Thanks for watching. My name is Anderson, and I'll see you in the next video.